Hello and welcome to Ratio Dialogue with me, Jonas Gravström. Today we are having a conversation with Dan Klein of George Mason University. We will talk about Adam Smith's view on social justice. Welcome back, Dan, to Ratio Dialogue. Fourth time, I would imagine. So today we'll talk about social justice, and you have written a paper about Adam Smith's possible views on social justice, and he explained that he actually writes a little bit about it, even though most people think he just talk about
Commutative justice. That's right. There's justice in Smith beyond commutative. Commutative is the narrow sense of justice. It's more like grammar, where the rules of it are more precise and accurate. Don't steal other people's stuff. Don't break contracts.
Don't mess with other people's stuff.
Don't mess with other people's stuff.
Usually right.
And the rules of those things, property, voluntary agreement, have evolved to be like grammar, to be precise and accurate, so that provide a kind of basic social grammar, okay, so that we can peaceably get on with each other. And this form of justice is very, very important, but it's not the whole of justice by any means. Just to give you an idea of, just like grammar,
Yeah.
you must conform to grammar,
Yeah.
right? You don't break grammar. But if you abide by grammar, you do your grammar right, that doesn't earn you any praise.
No.
So, you don't get applauded because you didn't go out and steal someone's stuff today. Way to go, Jonas. You didn't.
Job interview, show up, clean and with good clothes.
Yes.
Bare minimum.
Bare minimum, right. Just like grammar. I mean, and after all, sitting still and doing nothing, you can regard as abiding by by commutative justice. Just as if you turned in a blank piece of paper, your grammar's perfect.
Yeah, nothing wrong there.
But there's no praise to be had. So you have to go beyond commutative to get praise. And these other forms of justice are not precise and accurate. They're like the rules of what's good or beautiful.
Yeah.
Smith used the term becoming,
Yeah.
acting in a way that is becoming. So we do have to step beyond commutative, for sure. After all, if we want to uphold commutative justice as something important, well, what justifies that? Wouldn't we look to another kind of justice to justify commutative justice?
Yeah, would assume. Yeah.
Right? And there are exceptions to commutative justice, especially when we get to government policy, where sometimes the government has to mess with people's stuff.
Yeah.
And you need rules for that. And that's another kind of justice.
Yeah, one example, if you're out in a snowstorm and you see a cabin, it's not breaking commutative justice even if you break in, save your life and...
Yes, even in non-governmental affairs, on the rare occasion, we are justified to violate commutative justice. Like if your life depends on it out in the wilderness to break into a cabin, let's say. So there is justice beyond this commutative justice. So what is there beyond? Well, a lot of people go from the one to something bigger, and they just go to one other.
Yeah.
Like there's commutative, and then there's something else, and the thing that people talk a lot about is social justice.
Yeah.
And you got to go beyond commutative, so you got to talk justice in some larger way, but is that good enough to go from one to two? And I don't think it is.
No.
Justice has to be about conduct, human behavior, human action, human conduct. And so you have to talk about somebody. First of all, you have to identify somebody.
Yep.
Acting in a situation and making an action that violates some sense of just rules, even if those rules are not precise and accurate. A lot of the social justice talk doesn't achieve that. They'll say, some people are poor and some people are rich. That's socially unjust. Well, who is the actor? What is the action? What was the situation of that, let's say, our man Jim doing when he supposedly did something wrong, something unjust? And if you just say social justice because some people are poor and some people are rich, you're not identifying any of that. So it's often rather unsatisfying. Smith said it's always about a person acting in an unjust way. So what are those sorts of actions? For Smith, this larger justice, the whole of justice, is tri-layered, 3. It's not enough to go to just 2, commutative and then something else. You got to go from commutative to the next thing is doing things with your own resources in a way that is becoming, distributing your time, your attention, your money, your influence, distributing those things in a way that serves other people's interests and in some vague sense their rights. Okay? So the whole spirit of justice, the concept of justice, is that rights and duties are correlative. So my duty is to respect other people's rights. So when I do this duty of distributing things properly, it kind of corresponds to a vague right that certain people out there connected to me have for me to do that. Okay? But they're very vague. It's very hard to decide how they all work together, how to sort them out. We're going to disagree about that. So that's what he calls distributive. It's Jonas making a becoming use of what is Jonas's own, your own stuff. And you do that in connection with people who in some sense are that corresponding rights bearer. Okay, just like you're being a hospitable host to me here, right? And so I have a certain right to expect a certain kind of regard, for example, in this interaction. Okay, commutative, distributive. The third one is estimating objects properly. And an object can be anything. It can be this little bust of Adam Smith. Like if I were to throw this on the floor, it just wouldn't be, it would reflect a kind of unjust estimation of this object, for example. But the objects then become anything that your consciousness can see as a thing, an idea, a policy position, an opinion, estimating that properly. And when we talk about government policy, I think that becomes actually the important thing about estimating policy opinions properly. And it's different than social justice. I mean, social justice, it seems to me, kind of blurs these two together, and that doesn't really work well because they each have a somewhat different logic. And it's better to know which you're doing so that you can apply the logic more properly, more consistently. And so estimative is then an alternative way of talking beyond commutative, as is distributive. But estimative is, I think, really what Smith would recommend for most of our policy discourse. Like, are you estimating the world and objects in the world properly when you form these different opinions? The world's a very big place. The world is a very complicated place. And you have to estimate things. The responsibility is to estimate things in some overall good way, overall for the whole humankind even. See, that's so broad, it doesn't really make sense to think of it so much as a corresponding rights bearer. Like there's no particular people when you're talking about estimating an idea. And so it's good to know that and to realize that it's going to be a lot harder to invoke justice when it's so much more expansive and so much more open to interpretation. He always he suggested, at least by his example, that we should do this in a kind of calm or cool way. That is to say, when he gave his policy opinions, sometimes he pounded the fist against certain policy measures, but those were ones that violated commutative justice. So in some cases, it's okay, I think he felt, to get vehement, adamant about some injustices out there, like the slave trade, which we talked about previously. But more broadly, when you're talking about policies that do some messing with people's stuff, some regulating, some taxing, cool. Do it coolly, because we're going to disagree, and there's a lot to consider. And our knowledge of what is proper estimation is so uncertain. It's so limited, and our judgment is uncertain, and people are bound to disagree. And I think this is very pertinent. I'm sorry,
No,
I'm just expatiating, but this is very pertinent to our conversations today, where so much of the discourse is so emphatic about social justice. It's often very emphatic.
They almost use it as a bad name, like social justice warrior.
Yeah.
I've heard.
Exactly, because they're so insistent, and people should disagree and engage each other and consider their different interpretations of how to estimate these different kinds of objects that are of interest to us. So, the punchline is go beyond commutative. Justice is larger than that, but you got to jump from 1 to 3 types to kind of give integrity to those to the justice talk beyond commutative. If you're going to do distributive, who is your Jim? What are his resources? What's his situation? What is the action he did that maybe you object to? If you're going to do estimative, what is the object for estimation? And then you should, again, I think, be cool about the vast disagreements we're going to have about how to estimate it. So that's generally what I say. I think so. Generally, I think he would kind of frown on the way justice discourse is operating. Social justice discourse is operating.
What have we missed, or maybe not we, that Smith wrote about these 3 kind of justices?
There's a very important paragraph in here where he presents the 3 kinds of justices: commutative, distributive, and the third, which I call estimative. He did not actually give it a name to, but he did say it's a third kind. So there's a very important paragraph in here, and I think it's very clear there and elsewhere that he is affirming all 3. He's embracing all 3.
So where do you think the social justice will move in the kind of near future? What's happening in the world?
You mean social justice ways of speaking, or?
Roughly, because I think there's different movements, and they're trying to achieve different things, and I don't know if it's all good.
Well, sure. I think there's big disagreements in policy movement and agenda. So where do I think things are going? Oh, it's hard to say. I do think that in some ways people are getting fed up with the extremities of some of the discourse and the policies. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll stop or be reversed, though. I just think people don't believe in them. I think there's a lot of denial and hypocrisy surrounding them, in fact.
How did you get the idea for your paper?
Well, I think justice is a really important thing to sort out.
Yeah.
It's really fundamental. And I think he does a good job, but I don't think his way of sorting it out is that well understood. So I'm, trying to
Enlighten us.
clarify it. And again, I think that squishing these 2 together and having this vague expression, whatever the expression would be, but the going expression is social, it doesn't work well. It doesn't make you intellectually accountable.
No, because you can really put in whatever you want in social justice.
Yeah, I mean, very often it's not even clear whose action or what exact object or what is under consideration. It's just like something's wrong.
Something wrong. Or
Like
somebody
I
want
wanted
to have something.
What's that?
Or somebody want to have something.
Yeah. You
Other
know,
people's
this is
stuff.
my policy agenda. It's socially just. I mean, okay, so who's the actor? What's the action? What's unjust about that action? They're not really breaking it down.
No. Maybe we should put a stop here. Because
Oh.
I don't have any more questions.
That's fine.
So,
It sounds like a just way to conclude.
yeah. But I think we have learned a little bit of social justice and Smith's take on it. And thank you very much for being part of Voluntary Dialogue.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening.